Target locked. Lieutenant Corrin's voice was steady, but there was an edge of urgency in it. We have the Raixi warship in range. Ready to fire on your command, Admiral. Admiral Rhys Tarrin's eyes were fixed on the heads-up display in front of him, watching the blinking red marker of the enemy ship slowly coming into focus. The Raixi ship wasn't moving fast. It didn't have to. It was a strategic maneuver, a direct threat aimed at Zal's outpost, Earth's last defense in the northern sector. Tarrin's grip tightened around the edge of the console. Every second, every hesitation, could be the difference between victory and annihilation. Commence fire, he said flatly. A split second of silence passed. Then the command was relayed, the ship shuddering slightly, as the first volley of energy blasts surged toward the Raixi warship. But before the missiles could hit, a harsh, grinding alarm filled the room, drawing Tarrin's gaze to the flashing red lights along the perimeter. His hands clenched, frustration building as the display showed nothing but empty space. The Raixi ship had vanished. What the hell? Corrin muttered under his breath. It's gone off the grid. A sinking feeling filled Tarrin's gut. The Raixi were cunning, and this was no mistake. This was a trap, and they'd just walked right into it. Admiral, General Lysander Vorn's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and urgent. We've just received orders to stand down. The Council wants to negotiate with them again. They're not to be engaged unless we get confirmation of an imminent attack. Tarrin's teeth ground together as he ran a hand through his hair. Every fiber in his body screamed to act, to end this madness. But the Council had spoken. Again, another round of peace talks, another cycle of inaction. His fingers hovered over the command panel, the weight of the decision pressing against his chest. To disobey, to strike without orders, it could end his career. But Zal's outpost was vulnerable. The colony would be wiped out within hours, its defenses shattered under the Raixi's onslaught. How many more lives would be lost before Earth's leaders could be bothered to act? How many more colonies are we willing to lose before we admit that negotiations are useless? Tarrin's voice was low, almost to himself as he stared at the now empty space where the enemy ship had been moments ago. General Vorn's footsteps echoed in the command center, a heavy presence that filled the room with its silent weight. You know as well as I do that this isn't a decision we can make alone. Race. The Council must approve military action. It's how we've always done things. Tarrin's gaze snapped to Vorn's, the tension thick between them. Vorn had been his mentor, a man of reason and duty. But now, in this moment of desperate need, Vorn was bound by the same bureaucratic chains that had crippled Earth's response for decades. The same chains that would doom Zal's outpost. How long do we wait, Vorn? Tarrin asked, his voice gaining strength. How long do we wait while the Raixi tighten their grip on our colonies? Do we keep hoping they'll suddenly change their minds and respect a peace treaty that was never meant to hold? Vorn's expression softened, but the weight of responsibility bore down on him like a mountain. I understand your frustration, but you know what this means. Acting without orders, without confirmation, could fracture everything. It could tear this entire fleet apart. Tarrin didn't break his gaze, his mind working furiously. The longer they waited, the greater the cost would be. The Council's hesitation wasn't just a political flaw. It was a death sentence for Earth's colonies. He could feel it now, the burden of leadership on his shoulder. It wasn't about orders anymore. It was about survival. If you're not willing to make that call, then I will, Tarrin said, his words firm, like steel. He turned back to the tactical display, his finger hovering just above the fire button. We've been paralyzed for too long. Vorn stepped forward, his voice lower now, quieter. Race, don't. If you do this, you're beyond saving. We'll both be branded as traitors. Tarrin didn't look up. His eyes were locked on the display again, as if the path forward would reveal itself there. Then call me what you will. But Zal's outpost is a lifeline, and I won't wait until it's gone to make a decision. Vorn watched him in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Finally he gave a small nod. If you're going to do it, I'll stand by you. But know this. There's no coming back from this. Tarrin's gaze never wavered. We're already beyond that point, Vorn. With a sharp motion, Tarrin slammed his hand down onto the console, issuing the order to fire. The commands buzzed through the system, the ship shuddering, as energy blasts surged out toward the void, toward the location where the Raixi ship had been moments ago. For a moment, Tarrin felt the tension release. Just a little. A spark of hope, but it was quickly smothered by the grim realization. that this was only the beginning. The political consequences of his actions would follow, no matter how successful the strike. The heads-up display lit up with data, confirming the destruction of the Rexy warship. They had won this round, but Terran knew, deep down, that the fight for Earth's survival had only just begun. As he leaned back in his chair, his hands trembling, the door to the command center slid open. Vorn stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "We've done it," Terran said, his voice raw but resolute. "But we've just opened Pandora's box." Vorn gave him a long, searching look. "The Council won't forgive this. And neither will the galaxy. You know that." Terran nodded slowly, the reality of his choice settling in. "Let them come. We'll face the consequence." But even as he said it, a gnawing sense of dread sank in. He had acted, but the cost of that action, of defying the Council, would be felt throughout the entire galaxy. Outside the command center, the sounds of Earth's war machine continued, indifferent to the moral cost of their new mission. Terran's mind raced. He had fired the first shot. "Target acquisition confirmed, Admiral." Lieutenant Corrin's voice was clipped, taut with urgency. The laser plasma display flickered as the Rexy warship came into view on the tactical map, just within range, its dark silhouette hanging ominously against the void of space. Its weapons systems were primed, and if it wasn't intercepted soon, Zale's outpost would be destroyed within hours. Terran's mind raced, every detail flashing before him with the clarity of cold steel. They couldn't wait for the Council. The Rexy had already shown their hand. "Launch the strike," Terran commanded, his voice flat, devoid of hesitation. The words left his mouth like the pull of a trigger. He wasn't asking. He wasn't waiting. Every moment spent deliberating was a moment that would cost lives. The decision was his to make. The consequences of inaction had already been decided for him. The command was relayed with mechanical precision. The rumble of the ship's reactors surged through the floor. A brief shudder as the weapon systems activated. Terran could hear nothing but the thrum of his heartbeat in his ear. His fingers hovers over the console, ready to execute the final confirmation. This was it, the moment when history would mark him either as a savior or a traitor. Firing. Corrin's voice broke the stillness. Sharp, almost relieved. A series of bright streaks lit up the display as the missiles launched, their trajectories cutting through the dark expanse. For a brief moment Terran felt the weight of it, the soundless violence of it, all of it happening in the cold vacuum outside the hull. A wave of energy surged through his chest as he watched the missiles streak toward their target. Terran stood motionless, his eyes never leaving the screen, waiting for the first sign of confirmation. The screen blinked once, twice, before the display flared with a single devastating message: "Target destroyed." He didn't feel the rush of victory. There was no triumphant cheer, no acknowledgement of success, just the hollow click of the next phase of the mission locking into place. The Rexy warship was gone, but that didn't change the fact that Earth's politics would never be the same. "Rexy fleet is retreating." Corrin spoke again, a slight tremor in his voice. "We hit them hard, Admiral." Terran didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the now empty sector where the warship had been moments ago. He knew this wasn't over. It would never be. The retreat didn't signify peace. It was a tactical withdrawal. Terran's actions had disrupted the balance, but the consequences of this defiance would follow him like a shadow. He could feel it deep within his gut, the sense that something far more dangerous was coming. "Prepare for follow-up," Terran ordered, his voice steady, though his thoughts were far from calm. "Get me an update on Zale's outpost. I want confirmation of their defenses." As Corrin moved to relay the message, Terran stepped away from the console, his boots clicking sharply on the cold floor. He stared out at the view screen, the distant stars offering no comfort. The decision had been made, but the weight of it had already sunk deep into his bones. The sound of footsteps drew his attention. General Vorn entered the room, his expression grim, the lines of his face drawn tight. He didn't need to say anything. The tension in the air was thick enough to slice. "Reese," Vorn started, his voice low, "you've crossed a line now." "I didn't have a choice," Terran replied, his eyes not leaving the screen. "The Council couldn't make a decision in time. I did what was needed." Vorn's hands clenched at his sides, his chest rising and falling with each breath. "It doesn't matter. The Council will call you a rogue, a warmonger. You've set us on a path with no return." Terran turned slowly to face him, his expression unwavering. "Then let them." I'll wear the title if it means keeping Earth's colonies intact. I didn't act out of ambition, Vorn. I acted out of necessity, and now the Council has to reckon with the reality of their indecision. General Vorn's eyes narrowed, the conflict between duty and loyalty battling behind them. The Council won't forgive you for this, and neither will the galaxy. You know that, don't you? Taran's jaw tightened, the words hanging in the air. The war, this game of endless negotiations and delays, had reached its breaking point. His decision had been swift, decisive, and now the consequences were inescapable. His future, his reputation, were now in the hands of the Council, and he would face whatever came next. There was no other option. He could not allow Earth to be complacent while the galaxy burned. The silence stretched between them, heavy, laden with the weight of their unspoken understanding. Finally, Vorn spoke, his voice quieter, almost resigned. I hope you're right. I hope you've done what needed to be done. I've done what needed to be done, Taran repeated, his voice firm. The words settled around them like a heavy cloak. The command center was tense with the quiet aftermath. The sounds of the crew moving in the background felt distant, muffled, as if the air itself had thickened. Taran could sense it. His choices were no longer his own. The Council, the military, the galaxy, they would see his actions as either a defining moment of strength or a fatal mistake. The report came in minutes later. The Vrexy fleet had begun their retreat, but the retreat didn't lessen the gravity of what had transpired. The silence in the room stretched longer than it should have. Taran's mind was already on the next step, but the reality was beginning to sink in. They would never let this pass without consequence. He had crossed a line that would either make him a martyr or destroy everything he had fought for. His console beeped again, breaking the tension. A new message from Earth Command flashed across the screen, an official statement from the Council. The words were cold, calculated, and the meaning was clear. Taran's actions had not been approved. The Council did not condone his unilateral strike. His fate, and Earth's political stability, hung in the balance. The door to the command center slid open again. This time, the figure who entered wasn't General Vorn, but a liaison from Earth's Council, Senator K. The man's expression was unreadable, but Taran didn't need any more words to know the Council's decision. His eyes met the senator's for a brief moment, and just like that, Taran understood. The trial had already begun. The fall from grace was already set into motion. This will cost you, Admiral, Senator Taran said softly, his voice tinged with a sense of finality. Taran's lips curled slightly, but there was no humor in it. I've already paid the price. With that, Taran turned back to the view screen. The retreating Vrexy ships now nothing but a distant memory. His fate was sealed. The political fallout would begin soon, and no amount of preparation would save him from the storm that was about to break over Earth. Admiral Taran's actions cannot go unchecked. The words from Senator Auric Zane cut through the crowded room, his voice a silken weapon crafted for political theater. His tone was controlled, but the undercurrent of disdain was unmistakable. He had been waiting for this moment, waiting to turn Taran's decision into a political spectacle. The Council was no longer just divided on strategy. It was now a battleground for power, and Zane knew exactly how to exploit the situation. His reckless actions have not only endangered Earth's diplomatic standing, but have tarnished the very core of our intergalactic agreements. Zane continued, his eyes sweeping over the gathered media representatives. His words were calculated to wound, his gaze like a hawk picking its prey from the crowd. Earth cannot afford to be led by a man who disregards the principles that have kept us secure. The press conference room, filled with the staccato clicking of cameras and the soft murmur of reporters scribbling down every word, grew heavy with anticipation. Taran's reputation, once that of a war hero, was now teetering on the edge of the abyss, and Zane was not about to let the moment slip by. Back in the command center aboard Taran's ship, the feeling of betrayal settled over him like a thick fog. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the laser plasma display in front of him, the image of Zane's press conference cutting through the static. The words were carefully selected, each one designed to isolate him further from his ally. Vorn entered the room, the door sliding shut behind him with a soft click. He had been present during the Council's initial condemnation of Taran's decision, but now he found himself struggling to reconcile his personal loyalty with the political reality that was unfolding. His boots clacked on the cold metal floor as he moved toward Taran, his face etched with concern. "You've heard the broadcast," Vorn said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Terran didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the display, the words from Zane and his colleagues reverberating in his mind like a constant hum. "I didn't expect them to forgive me," Terran muttered. His voice was taut, controlled, yet there was an unmistakable edge of frustration. "But I didn't think they'd turn it into a weapon so quickly. Every report I read, every press release they've issued, it's like watching a gutting operation in real time." Vorn stood beside him, studying the screen. "Zane's maneuvering is no accident. He wants your position, Terran. This isn't just about your actions. This is a political coup." Terran looked at him then, a brief flicker of understanding passing between them. "And you? Where do you stand in all of this?" Vorn hesitated, his gaze flicking back to the laser plasma display. "You know I stand with you. Always have. But this is more than a simple rebellion against orders. This is a clash of ideologies, and the Council will use your defiance to push for greater control." A deep silence fell between them, broken only by the low hum of the ship's system. Terran's mind raced, grappling with the weight of what Vorn had said. "I'm not going to apologize for what I did. Vorn, I did what had to be done, and if the Council wants to tear me down for it, then let them. I'll face it head on." Vorn's eyes softened, his voice lower now. "But can you face it alone, Reese? If the Council decides to strip you of your command, if they force you into the public eye as a scapegoat, will you have anyone left to stand with you?" Terran's gaze hardened. "If the Council decides that, then it's not just me they're destroying. It's everything we've worked for. And if they want to tear that down, they'll have to tear me down first." As if on cue, the doors to the command center opened, and a quiet murmur ran through the crew. Terran glanced up, and there stood one of the officers, a subordinate with a message from Earth Command. He handed over the encrypted datapad without a word, his face a mask of solemnity. Terran looked at it, his eyes scanning the contents before he let out a low, bitter laugh. The message was official. "The Council has issued a statement condemning your actions. The full extent of your defiance will be addressed in a public trial. You will be stripped of command pending further investigation." Vorn didn't flinch, but Terran could see the anger boiling beneath his calm exterior. "It's already begun," Vorn said quietly. "This isn't just a trial of your actions, Terran. This is a trial of Earth's military leadership. And Zane, he's already preparing to take your place." Terran's expression darkened, and his fist clenched around the datapad. "Let him try, but it won't change anything. The Vraxi will come again, and they won't care who's leading Earth when they do. We need to think this through," Vorn said, his voice tinged with worry. "Zane is calculating every move. The public will be on his side. No matter what you say, he's already positioned himself as the voice of reason, the man who upholds the Council's vision of peace." Terran stood, his jaw tight, as the weight of Vorn's words settled over him. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in. His future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Earth's leadership was already preparing to throw him to the wolves. The door opened again, and Senator Zane's face appeared on the heads-up display, his expression smooth. "Admiral Terran," Zane said, the sarcasm dripping from his words. "I'm sure you're well aware that your actions have not only endangered Earth's strategic position, but have shattered any remaining faith in our military's discipline. The Council will address this appropriately. Your military career ends here." Terran stood motionless, his fingers still gripping the edge of the datapad. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Zane had already made his judgment. The political battle was over. But Terran's resolve, though tested, remained unbroken. He would not go quietly. No matter the cost, he would continue to fight, not just for his own future, but for the future of Earth. If Zane thought he could crush him so easily, then he had another thing coming. As Zane's smug face disappeared from the display, Terran's thoughts turned once more to the Vrax. The war was far from over, and if the Council couldn't see that, he would make them understand. He would do it alone if necessary. Turning to Vorn, Terran spoke quietly. We'll show them all." The general nodded, his expression hardening as they prepared for the next phase of this quiet war. Terran knew that whatever came next, there was no turning back. The air in the holding cell was thick, heavy with the absence of sound. Terran's hands were shackled to the cold metal wall, his eyes fixed on the small flickering light above him, a pale glow that seemed to mock him from its unyielding position. Time had become irrelevant, measured only by the faint ticking of his own heartbeat and the occasional echo of distant footsteps. The walls of the cell pressed in on him, as though closing around him, choking out any escape. But the silence, an absence of voices, felt suffocating, more than the physical confinement ever could. He had been brought here after the trial, a process that had felt more like an execution than a hearing. There had been no defense, no real examination of the facts, just the cold, mechanical decision of those in power. Senator Zane's calculated rhetoric still echoed in his mind, each word carefully chosen to sever any remaining support he might have had. The tribunal had found him guilty of insubordination, of threatening the delicate fabric of Earth's peace. His actions, once heralded as heroic, had now become the very reason for his downfall. A soft chime echoed through the room. Taran's eyes flickered toward the source of the sound. A heads-up display flickered to life beside him. The message was short, impersonal, and cold. "Your punishment will commence now." The door to his cell slid open with a muted hiss, and two armed guards stepped inside, their heavy boots thudding against the metal floor. They didn't look at him as they approached, their movements robotic, routine. One of them reached for the small cylindrical device attached to the side of his belt. Taran's pulse quickened, a sudden tension tightening in his chest. It was the neural silencing device. He had heard of it, of course. The council had never publicly acknowledged it, but whispers had spread through the ranks. A tool to silence those who dared to challenge the system. A device designed to sever a person's ability to speak, to control them without the need for violence. But no one had ever truly known its full power, its ability to take away not only a person's voice, but their sense of self. "Remove his restraints," one of the guards muttered to the other, his voice flat, detached. Taran didn't resist as they unlocked the shackles, his limbs stiff from the hours of immobility. The device was attached to the back of his neck, the cold, smooth surface pressing against his skin. A sharp sensation shot through his spine as the neural device activated. A rush of pressure filled his head, followed by the excruciating tightness that constricted his throat. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. His breath caught in his chest, trapped, and panic rose within him. But still he couldn't produce a single word. The guards stepped back, their impassive eyes meeting his. For a brief moment, Taran saw a flicker of something, sympathy perhaps, beneath their hardened exterior, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the cold professionalism that had become the new face of Earth's authority. "You'll remain here until further orders," one of the guards said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The device will remain active. You are no longer a voice in this conflict." As they turned and left the room, Taran's body sagged against the wall, his chest heaving with silent gasps. His thoughts spiraled, a whirlwind of anger and helplessness. The government had taken his voice. Yes, but they had not taken his mind. His mind still burned with the knowledge that he had done what needed to be done, and now they were trying to erase him, to erase his very existence as a leader. His mind was alive with images. His crew, his officers, his comrades, General Vorn. They had all been complicit, either in action or silence, in his fall from grace. But what would they think of him now? What would they say if they saw him like this, stripped of his voice, and left to rot in this cell? Would they even dare to speak out against the council? Or would they too fall in line, afraid of the same fate that had befallen him? A new wave of frustration boiled inside him. His defiance had led him here, yet his conviction had not waned. Even without a voice, his mind roared with defiance. He would not allow himself to be erased. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the suffocating grip of isolation. The only sounds were his breath, ragged and shallow, and the distant muffled activity that filtered through the walls. Finally the door opened once more, and a figure entered. Taran's eyes narrowed. It was Vorn, tired, haggard, yet still a man of presence. He stood there for a moment, his gaze locked with Taran's, as if weighing his words. Vorn had always been a man of few words, but in that moment, Taran could feel the weight of their shared history. "You've paid the price for your actions," Vorn said, his voice low. "But this, what they've done to you, isn't just a punishment, it's a statement. They're making sure that no one else dares to challenge their control." Taran stared at him, his chest tight, the weight of his own inability to speak pressing against him like a physical force. He wanted to scream, to tell Vorn everything, how he had been right, how he had been justified, but the words never left his lips. The device held him captive. Vorn's gaze softened, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I tried to stop them, but Zane, He's too powerful. You've made him your enemy. And that's something no one can easily undo. Taran clenched his fists at his sides, his body trembling with the effort of holding his anger in check. The defiance still burned inside him. He would not be silenced like this. He would find another way. Even without his voice, his presence was enough. The rebellion had already begun. It was just a matter of time before others saw the truth. Vorn lingered for a moment, his eyes locked with Taran's. I don't know what will happen next, but I'll do what I can to keep the fires of this cause alive. With that he turned and left, the door sliding shut behind him with a soft hiss. Taran's breath came in shallow bursts. The silence pressed in again, but this time Taran no longer feared it. He would not be forgotten, no matter what they did to him. His legacy would continue, even if they stripped him of everything else. They could not take away the fight that lived in his heart. The door to the dimly lit room slid shut with a soft hiss, sealing off the world outside. Commander Dorian Kai stood in the center, his back straight, eyes scanning the room. The walls were bare, save for the flickering laser plasma display at the far end, casting an eerie light on the faces gathered around the table. It was a small group, just 6 officers, but each one carried a weight that could shift the course of Earth's fate. Dorian's fingers tapped the table in a measured rhythm, the sound like a quiet drumbeat in the otherwise tense atmosphere. His gaze settled on each man around the table. Lieutenant Alaric, tactical genius, with a knack for deception. Commander Jareth, a towering figure, once a loyal follower of Earth's peace accords. Sergeant Quillen, a veteran of countless skirmishes. They were all here for one reason. Taran, not the man he had once been in their eyes, but the legacy he had ignited. We're not just here to talk strategy. Dorian's voice cut through the silence, low and deliberate. We're here because the truth has already been hidden from us long enough. Taran's actions, they were just the beginning, and now, we must do what they're too afraid to. Lieutenant Alaric leaned forward, his fingers brushing over the heads-up display, bringing up a series of encrypted transmissions. He paused, then spoke, his tone cautious but resolute. We can't just walk out of here and start a war. The Council's already branding him a traitor. If we go public now, they'll hunt us down. Even worse, they'll turn our own forces against us. And we'll keep hiding while Earth burns. Dorian's voice rose, sharp with frustration, but quickly leveled again. The Vrixi didn't stop, and the Council is still too busy playing politics while they carve out our colonies. If we're ever going to stop them, it's not just the Vrixi we have to fight, it's the corruption from within. Silence settled over the room once more. The weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. You're talking about rebellion. Jareth's deep voice rumbled, each word a test. He had once believed in the Council, believed in the very peace they had fought so hard to preserve. We've all sworn to follow Earth's orders, but this is treason. Treason? Dorian scoffed, shaking his head. Treason would be doing nothing. If we let this continue, if we let the Council strangle Earth's future under their laws, we'll have no one left to say. Sergeant Quillen, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight. We're not just talking about rebellion. We're talking about a shift in power. A war that can't be stopped. If we act now, we risk everything. If we wait any longer, there won't be an Earth left to save. Then what's the plan? Alaric asked, his eyes narrowing as he pulled up a schematic of Earth's Central Command. Taran may have inspired you, but you're the one in charge now. We need a way forward. Dorian exhaled sharply, a plan already forming in his mind. Taran's tactics, his playbook. It's more than a list of strategies. It's a blueprint for taking back what's ours. We start small. We hit their supply lines, infiltrate their communications, strike from the shadow. We build their distrust from within. Soon, we won't be just a ragtag group. We'll be an army. And the Council? Jareth asked, his gaze dark. They won't just roll over for this. Let them make their move. Dorian said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. They'll start with their usual tactics. Fewer resources, tighter control, but we'll stay ahead of them, every step, and when they move too far, we'll strike, harder than they expect. The group exchanged uncertain looks, but Dorian could see the flicker of resolve beginning to burn in their eyes. The seed of rebellion had been planted, and now it was growing. Taran's silence, his enforced muteness, had become a rallying cry, an emblem of everything they were fighting to protect. It wasn't just about defeating the Vrixi anymore. It was about reclaiming Earth's soul. This isn't just about winning a war, Dorian added, the room falling silent once again. It's about proving that they can't silence us. Not forever. Dorian's eyes flicked to the old warship model that stood in the corner of the room. A relic of the old guard of Earth's military. Once it had been used to defend Earth's borders. A symbol of the strength and resolve that had defined humanity's early years. Now it was a symbol of rebellion. A message that the past wasn't something to be erased, but something to be reclaimed. They would fight on their terms, not the Council's. The warship, Dorian said, nodding toward the corner. It's more than just a ship. It's a message. Earth's military, built on the strength of its past, is still capable of fighting. We'll use it, but not for defense. We'll take it back, and it will become the beacon of our rebellion. We'll make them listen, and we'll make them understand. Alaric tapped the display again, bringing up a list of the first targets, key military facilities, command centers, and supply depots. The list was methodical, precise, and daring. Terran had always said, strike fast, and don't let them catch their breath. It was a philosophy that Dorian now fully embraced. We move at night, Dorian continued. His voice firm. We'll strike swiftly, confuse them, make them second-guess every move they make. The first operation will be small, but once we've gained momentum, we'll have enough support to break through. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The officers around the table stood straighter, their posture reflecting a new sense of purpose. The weight of the decision was still there, but so was something else. Hope, and that hope was enough to fuel them forward. Let's get to work, Dorian said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. The rebellion starts now. Hours later, Dorian found himself alone in his quarters. The sound of soft footsteps outside the door signaling the arrival of his trusted officer, Alaric. The door slid open, and Alaric stepped in, his face taut with both anticipation and concern. The first wave is ready, Alaric said, his eyes gleaming with determination. The movement's already spreading. We've got a few key operatives in position. Dorian nodded, his mind already working through the next steps. Good. We need to keep up the pressure. Every piece of information we gather, every strike we make, will bring us closer. We'll make them see that there's no stopping us. As Dorian turned back toward the window, staring out at the dimly lit expanse of space, he knew this was just the beginning. The rebellion was no longer a secret. It was a force to be reckoned with, and no matter what the Council did, no matter how they tried to suppress it, Terran's legacy would be the fire that would ignite Earth's future. The rebellion had begun. Open fire, Commander Dorian Kai ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The crackling of laser plasma displays lit up the control center as the rebel fleet unleashed its first volley. The tremor of energy blasts reverberated through the hull of the flagship, vibrating the walls in time with the pounding rhythm of his heart. It was all happening now, every piece of the plan falling into place. The rebels had struck fast and decisively. The disarray among Earth's military forces was palpable. Officers scrambled, their voices rising in panic as the rebel assault force overwhelmed key defense systems. There was no more room for hesitation. Earth had ignored the warning signs for too long. The Vrexi were no longer the only threat. Target the command center, Dorian barked, his eyes flicking over the heads-up display. His fingers moved with practiced precision, issuing commands faster than the system could process. The countdown began, and within moments another barrage of energy surged toward the heart of Earth's defenses. Across the room, Alaric's eyes narrowed as the data streamed in. We're doing damage, but they're holding strong. Earth's military has more resources than we anticipated. Dorian's gaze darkened. The strategy was sound, but Earth's forces were not without strength. Still, the rebellion had momentum now, a force that no amount of bureaucracy or political games could stop. For the first time in years, the military felt like it was moving toward a real victory. But the Vrexi were moving too, their ships flashing across the screen like shadowed phantoms. A new offensive was unfolding, their forces coming in from the rear, flanking Earth's defense line. Terran's legacy, his playbook, was being put to use in every operation. But now the stakes were higher. Not only did they face internal strife, but the galaxy's oldest enemy had chosen this very moment to strike. Earth's leadership had left them vulnerable. We've got incoming, Alaric said, his voice sharp. He quickly moved to the next tactical display, fingers flying across the controls. Vrexi cruisers, 5 of them. They're targeting the communication hubs. They're trying to cut us off. The room fell into a tense silence as the gravity of the situation set in. Dorian's mind raced, every muscle in his body poised for action. They couldn't allow the Vrexy to disrupt their communications. Not now. He gritted his teeth. Activate the countermeasure. If we lose contact, we lose everything. With a single press of a button, the rebel fleet fired a barrage of EMP missiles. A ripple of energy coursed through the rebel ships, temporarily disabling their own systems, as well as the Vrexy's attempts to jam their signal. A calculated risk, but one that had to work. It was their only chance to keep their tactical advantage. EMP bursts are clearing their systems, Alaric reported. We're back online. Dorian exhaled, but it was brief. The Vrexy were relentless, and Earth's fractured command would not be easy to dismantle. As Dorian refocused on the tactical display, a sudden explosion rocked the room. The overhead lights flickered before going out entirely. The only illumination now came from the laser plasma displays, casting an eerie glow across the darkened room. We've lost the secondary generator, Alaric shouted. Shields are down. We're exposed. Dorian's instincts kicked in. Get the shields back online now, he commanded, but his words were drowned out by the rising chorus of alarms blaring in the command center. Every man in the room was in motion, scrambling to stabilize the situation. But deep down, Dorian knew this wasn't just about holding the line anymore. It was about survival. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the shaking stopped. For a brief moment, there was only the sound of his breath, ragged and shallow, as the quiet began to fill the gaps between the chaos. He looked up at the heads-up display, watching as a new set of data points appeared. We've hit their core systems, Alaric reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. But they're adapting. They've already rerouted their defense network. They knew we'd go for the comm hubs. Dorian clenched his fists, frustration bubbling under the surface. They're not just fighting back. They're playing our moves before we even make them. The sound of boots on the floor interrupted Dorian's thoughts, and he turned to see Commander Jareth stride in, his face grim. The Council's watching. They've already sent a message. It's clear they want us to pull back now. They're offering to negotiate with the Vrexy. Dorian's eyes narrowed as he processed the message. A cold, bitter laugh escaped his lips. Negotiations, now, after everything? Jareth shrugged, a bitter edge to his voice. They've always been about survival. The Vrexy will press on, but so will the Council. They don't care about Earth's pride. They just want to end the conflict with minimal losses. The Council's always played for peace, Dorian muttered, stepping closer to the display. But we're not at peace anymore, and we never will be if we keep bending to their whims. He turned to the officers. We fight on our terms. No more waiting. No more hoping someone will come and save us. We take the fight to them. The rebellion had crossed the point of no return. There was no more room for half measures. No more promises of peace that had failed time and time again. Earth's fate had already been decided by those who had refused to act, and now the price was being paid. Suddenly the sound of a transmission broke through the chaos. A distorted voice crackling over the comms. Commander Kai, we're in position. We're ready for the next phase. Dorian's gaze flicked over to the tactical screen, watching as his fleet moved into position, preparing to strike at the heart of Earth's military command. This wasn't just a strike against the Vrexy. It was an assault on the very government that had failed to protect Earth's colony. Proceed with the operation, Dorian ordered, his voice like ice. No turning back now. The rebellion had taken root, and the time had come to see it through. In the distance, the image of Earth's flag, the symbol of unity and strength, flashed briefly on one of the laser plasma displays. But this time it was cracked, torn down the middle, split between the government and the people. The rebellion was not just a matter of survival. It was a declaration. Earth could no longer hide behind its politics. Dorian watched as the fleet moved. The next phase of the plan set into motion. He could feel the tension in the air as the rebel ships closed in on their target. Terran's final orders, delivered in writing but no less powerful, were now guiding them. The battle had only just begun. The storm was here, and there would be no retreat. Now, Dorian Kai barked, his voice sharp as a whip. His fingers slammed onto the controls of the laser plasma display, setting the final stage for the rebellion's most crucial mission. The laser beams streaked across the darkened battlefield, the deafening roar of plasma fire filling the air as the rebel fleet closed in on their target, the heart of Earth's corrupted military command and the advancing Vrexy fleet. The atmosphere was tense, the battle unfolding in a flurry of motion, chaos and strategy. But through it all, one thought echoed in Dorian's mind. Terran's playbook was the key. Every maneuver, every tactic was designed with one goal: to bring down both Earth's political structure and the Vraxi's iron grip on the galaxy. The enemy ships loomed large on the heads-up display, their massive hulls a grim reminder of the threat they posed. They were not just fighting to reclaim Earth. They were fighting to protect everything Terran had once stood for, everything Earth could have been. The image of Terran's face, still etched in Dorian's mind, flashed across his thoughts, his voice gone, but his presence stronger than ever. "Deploy the decoys," Dorian ordered, his eyes focused, calculating the next move. The rebels had studied the Vraxi tactics for weeks, exploiting every weakness. Now, they would make the Vraxi second-guess every decision they made. Laser plasma flares erupted as the decoys launched, drawing the Vraxi fire away from their fleet. Dorian's ship shuddered with the impact of enemy missiles, but the shields held firm, reflecting the weapons back with deadly precision. The rebel fleet weaved and dodged through the barrage, each maneuver a deliberate step closer to their goal. Direct hit on their flagship. Alaric, standing at the tactical console, shouted. His face was grim, but there was no denying the momentary satisfaction in his voice. "We've got them on the ropes, Commander." Dorian's gaze remained fixed on the display as he adjusted their course, guiding them into a final decisive strike. He could hear the low hum of the ship's systems as the crew worked seamlessly, following his commands without question. The rebellion was no longer just a spark. It was a fire that had swept through the galaxy, and now it was time to see it burn. "Time to finish this," Dorian muttered under his breath. The battle raged on. Explosions filled the void, distant and loud, as rebel ships fired relentlessly. The Vraxi ships, once formidable in their might, now looked more like cornered animals, their movements erratic as they attempted to regroup. But it was too late. "Commander," Alaric called again, his voice tinged with urgency. "We're getting a transmission from Earth's command. They've mobilized additional forces." Dorian's eyes flicked to the incoming transmission, a message from Earth's leadership, led by the very people who had condemned Terran to this fate. The words, though electronically distorted, were unmistakable. "Surrender. Cease the rebellion. Earth will not be held hostage by traitors." Dorian's mouth tightened into a grim smile. "Not today," he muttered. With a decisive gesture, he cut off the transmission and turned back to the battlefield. "Prepare to launch the final assault. We've waited long enough." As the final push began, the Vraxi flagship, their leader's ship, took a direct hit, sending it spiraling toward Earth's surface, a fiery ball of destruction. The rebel fleet moved swiftly, continuing their assault on Earth's government's forces, cutting through their defenses with precision. But the cost of this victory was written in the lives of those who had already fallen. "Commander," a voice came over the comms, muffled and strained. It was Jareth, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and sadness. "The Vraxi flagship is destroyed. We've done." But the communication cut off abruptly, as the sounds of distant explosions continued to rock the fleet. The loss of so many weighed heavily on Dorian. He had led them into battle, guided them through every move, but at what cost? The rebellion had cost them more than anyone had anticipated. Friends, comrades, lives, but they had won. Dorian's hand tightened around the controls as the battlefield began to clear. Earth's government forces were retreating, broken and fractured. The last of the Vraxi's fleet was in full retreat as well, their final ships slipping into the dark abyss of space. He stood silently for a moment, the weight of his decision settling on his shoulders. The silence in the command center was deafening. Victory had come, but at a great cost, and Terran's absence, the absence of his voice, felt like an unspoken presence that hung over them all. The silent leader had seen this day come, though he would never speak again. Dorian Jareth's voice came through again, clearer now. "The enemy's retreating. We've won." Dorian nodded, his expression somber. "We've won, but the battle for Earth's soul is just beginning." In the aftermath of the battle, as Earth's government scrambled to reorganize in the wake of their defeat, the world turned its gaze toward the silent figure who had sparked this rebellion, Admiral Terran. His absence from the battlefield was no longer just physical. It was a symbolic representation of everything they had lost, everything they had fought for. The image of Terran's face, his eyes full of conviction, his mouth forever sealed by the device, became the rallying cry for a new era. They had fought for his vision, for his ideal of a world where humanity no longer knelt before political power, where Earth's future was secured by those who understood its true value. Dorian turned to face the laser plasma display once more. The cracked Earth flag, now in their hands, fluttered as it was displayed across the fleet. The banner was tattered, torn, but it stood strong, defiant, a symbol of what they had endured and what they would rebuild. As the rebel fleet drifted through space, victorious yet scarred, The memory of Terran, his strength, his sacrifice, remained etched in every officer's mind. His ideals would never be silenced, not in this lifetime. The city stretched out before Dorian Kai, its skyline scarred but resilient. Earth was beginning to heal. Slowly, painfully, the sounds of rebuilding filled the air, the rhythmic pounding of construction, the hiss of machines laying new foundations, the soft murmur of voices carrying hope across the fractured landscape. The old regime had crumbled, and in its place something new was emerging. It was a tentative thing, fragile in its infancy, but it was born from the very principles that Terran had lived and died by: justice, strength, and a refusal to bow to tyranny. Dorian stood on the observation deck of the new government headquarters, looking out over the city. His mind, as always, was busy with the future: how to guide Earth through the rubble, how to build something solid from the ashes. But his eyes kept drifting to the monument in the square below. The statue was simple, but it spoke volumes. Terran's figure, carved in stone, stood tall and unyielding, his posture one of quiet command. His gaze, though unmoving and unblinking, seemed to see everything. He had been silenced in body, but his legacy was louder than ever. The wind tugged at Dorian's coat, the chill in the air a stark contrast to the warmth of the new day. Yet, as he stood there, he could feel the weight of Terran's absence pressing in on him. The silence left by his old comrade, the man who had led them all, still reverberated in every corner of Earth. But it was a silence filled with meaning. Terran's sacrifice, his unwavering determination to see a better Earth, had created something greater than himself. "Commander," a voice broke through Dorian's reverie. He turned to see Alaric approaching, his expression somber but resolute. Dorian nodded in acknowledgement. "We've started to establish communication with the remaining military leaders," Alaric said, glancing at the laser plasma display in Dorian's hand. "It's slow, but there's movement. We've also begun the process of dismantling the old political structures. But it won't be easy. They're entrenched. And there's still the matter of the Vrexy threat." Dorian's jaw tightened. He knew that their victory was not the end of the battle. The Vrexy were still out there, lurking in the shadows, ready to strike again. Earth's fragility had been laid bare, and the galaxy was watching. Earth's future won't be built on the fear of what could come next, Dorian said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of responsibility. "We can't keep hiding behind walls, behind treaty. It's time to stand up, and when the Vrexy come, we'll be ready." Alaric met his gaze. "And when they come, Commander," Dorian's eyes turned back to the city below, "we'll face them with everything we have. Earth's new government will stand as a symbol of what we've fought for. Terran's ideals won't die with him, not as long as we carry them forward." The two men stood there in silence for a moment, the wind tugging at their coats, the sound of construction echoing in the distance. But it wasn't just Earth that was being rebuilt. It was their very identity. The rebellion had been a catalyst, a violent eruption of truth, in the face of years of decay. But now, in its aftermath, they had the chance to rebuild, not just the infrastructure, but the very soul of their planet. It was a long road ahead, but it was a road that they would walk with purpose. "Dorian," Alaric said, breaking the stillness, "what about the council? The old leaders? They won't just disappear. They'll try to claw their way back." Dorian said, "But they don't have the will of the people anymore. We've broken the cycle. We've proven that Earth's future is ours to shape, not theirs." "But Terran," Alaric's voice trailed off, a shadow crossing his features. Dorian clenched his fists. He never needed his voice. His actions spoke for him, and they always would. Below them, the new flag of Earth waved gently in the breeze, its colors bold, its fabric still new. The old flag, the one that had once symbolized Earth's complacency, had been torn apart. The new banner was one of defiance, a declaration that Earth was not just surviving, but evolved. The changes would be slow, but they would be lasting. Every symbol of the past had been reimagined. They were no longer bound by the decisions of those who had turned a blind eye to the truth. Alaric turned, taking one last look at the flag before nodding. "The people will follow. They need hope. And Terran, his story will give them that." Dorian nodded, his gaze unwavering. "It will, and we'll make sure that it's never forgotten." As they walked away from the observation deck, their footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, the sound reverberating off the cold wall. The halls of the new government were quiet, still in the early stages of rebuilding, but already filled with the weight of the decisions to come. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Terran's legacy would remain. The silent monument, standing in the center of the city, was a testament to the past, but also to the future. It would stand as a reminder of the man who had defied the odds and given everything for a better. The rebellion had been a painful, bloody path, but it had led them here to a new beginning, and though the scars of war would remain, they were no longer marks of defeat. They were the symbols of a new strength, of a new Earth had been broken, but in its fracture, it had found its true identity. As Dorian reached the war room, the heads-up displays blinked to life with new updates. The Vrexi, though still a threat, were scattered and disorganized. Their reign of terror had been halted, but Earth's future was still fragile. The new government was beginning to take shape, and Terran's final directives were being implemented. The people had risen, not in violence alone, but in a demand for justice and change. The rebellion had been the spark, but now they had the chance to build something far more significant than any empire. Terran's ideals will guide us, Dorian said softly, his eyes fixed on the display. We will rebuild Earth in his image. The war was over. The final battle had been won, but it had left Earth in tatters, an echo of what it once was. The buildings, once symbols of power, now stood half-constructed, as though the planet itself were still in the process of finding its place. But amidst the rubble, there was a new energy, one that breathed life back into Earth's people. The old regime was gone, its leaders scattered like ash in the wind. A new order had begun to rise from the wreckage, and with it a future shaped by the ideals of a silent man. Dorian stood at the heart of Earth's rebuilt capital, the weight of his leadership pressing on him. He had become the face of change, the commander who had led the rebellion to victory. Yet as he walked through the streets of the new city, the faces of the people around him, hopeful yet haunted, told him all he needed to know. Their victory had come at too high a price. The silence left by Terran still echoed through the halls of power, and every corner of Earth. Above him the new flag of Earth, a bold red and blue, waved proudly in the wind, a symbol of unity forged through struggle. The old flag had been torn and discarded, replaced by one that represented not only the survival of Earth, but the strength and resolve of its people. Yet it was more than just a flag. It was a promise. In the central square, Terran's monument stood, taller than anything else, but still a somber figure. The statue was a perfect likeness, carved with the careful attention to detail that only time could produce. His face was stern but resolute, forever frozen in the moment of defiance that had sparked the rebellion. He had never spoken, but his silence had been more powerful than words could ever be. The people who gathered beneath it now, young and old, paused in reverence, their eyes reflecting a quiet understanding. Dorian approached the monument, his steps slow, heavy. The weight of Terran's absence settled on his shoulders, but so did the knowledge that Terran's spirit lived on in the very foundation of Earth's new future. The rebellion had been won, not just with tactics, but with belief, the belief that Earth had a future worth fighting for, a future that would no longer be shackled by corrupt leadership or fear of the unknown. Alaric walked up beside Dorian. The sharp lines of his face softened with weariness. They're looking to you, Commander. You've become the face of this change, but there's still much to do. Dorian nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the monument. The change we need isn't just in the government, Alaric, it's in us. Terran showed us the way, not just with his words, but with his actions. That's the legacy we need to honor, not just as a memory, but as a way forward. Will they follow? Alaric asked, uncertainty creeping into his voice. The people? They've seen what sacrifice can do. Will they believe in the cause enough to carry it on? Dorian's eyes flickered to the crowd gathering around the statue, their faces filled with a quiet determination. They will, because Terran's legacy isn't just a story, it's their story now. They've felt the cost of this rebellion, just as we have. They know what it means to fight for something worth believing in. The future belongs to those who choose to carry that torch. The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation, and General Vorn approached, his face a reflection of the years of struggle that had led them here. His eyes were filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. He stepped beside Dorian, looking up at Terran's monument. Do you think he would have wanted this? Vorn asked quietly. Dorian's gaze softened. He didn't want the praise, Vorn. He didn't want any of this, but he knew the price of silence, and he was willing to pay it. He fought because he believed that Earth deserved better. And now, it's up to us to make sure that his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Bourne let out a long breath, the weight of his years on Earth's front lines evident in the tired slump of his shoulders. I see it now. He may have been silenced in voice, but not in impact. We are the ones who will carry his vision forward. Dorian turned back to the crowd that had begun to gather beneath the statue, some of them speaking in hushed tones, others staring up at the monument, as though expecting Terran to rise again. There was hope in their eyes, but there was also an understanding of what had been lost, and that was the true strength of Terran's legacy, the ability to inspire even in the wake of such immense sacrifice. The quiet of the moment was broken by the sudden arrival of a young woman, her face resolute, but her hands shaking slightly as she held a small bundle. She stepped toward Dorian, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "Commander Kai," she said, her voice steady but soft. "My father fought with Terran. He was one of the first to join the rebellion. He died in the final assault." Dorian studied her for a moment, his eyes scanning the solemn expression on her face. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, his voice thick with the weight of the countless sacrifices made. She shook her head, the corner of her lips curling upward, despite the sadness in her eyes. "It's not a loss, Commander. It's a promise. My father believed in Terran's vision, and now it's up to us to carry it. My father's death wasn't just a price paid, it was the beginning of something better." She handed him the small bundle, and Dorian unwrapped it carefully. Inside there was a small flag, one with the emblem of the new Earth, a reminder of everything that had been lost, and everything they had to look forward to. "Take it," she said, her voice now filled with resolve. "It's a new flag for a new Earth." Dorian nodded slowly, his fingers tracing the edge of the fabric. It was worn, as though it had already been through much, but it was still strong, still whole. He raised it high for all to see, and the crowd erupted in a quiet cheer. The rebellion had ended, but Terran's influence would never fade. The sun began to set behind the monument, casting long shadows across the city as the last remnants of daylight flickered out. But even as the light dimmed, the flame of Terran's ideals burned bright within the hearts of Earth's people. The silent legacy of a fallen leader had given birth to a new world, and as Earth's new dawn broke, it was filled with the unspoken promise that the price of freedom would always be worth paying.